Hello, everybody. It's time to talk to another pro. Today we have Autimatic on the podcast. What is up, Tim? How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's great to talk to you. We've been talking for on and off for a long time, and you've been obviously a huge presence in the CS community. We were just talking. I was talking to you about like how there's so many people in Valorant that are kind of new into Valorant. It's their first FPS, their first esport. They may not be aware of your history, and you've kind of returned a bit into Valorant. So, um, for those of you that don't know, Automatic won a major in CS:GO with Tarik, by the way, as well. Like on that Cloud9 team, the famous. I mean, I even casted that. That's like my like career height moment as a caster. I feel like the Boston Major in 2018 in CS:GO. It's an absolutely epic tournament. The C9 versus FaZe in the grand finals, extremely hype. And Automatic was there on stage playing and winning. So that's a bit of a tidbit. But you've returned to Valorant, or you're looking to return to Valorant in this off season, and you were previously part of the EG CS roster. So a lot to talk about in terms of what's been going on in your career. But I know you're sort of in this spot now where you get to kind of like you can kind of go any direction you want. So how are you feeling about your where you are right now as a professional?
Um, I'm feeling good. I feel, that I obviously had 2 years in CS where I was rebuilding a lot of teams. I think we went through like 3 or 4 roster iterations, which is that's a lot in 4 or 2 years, I would say. So I feel like, been through a lot, learned a lot, and as a player, I still think I have a lot to work on, especially in Valorant when it comes to just like the mechanics and picking the right fights and that kind of stuff. But in terms of like what I can contribute to a team, I feel like I'm probably at my peak right now.
Nice. And in can you define that further a bit? In terms of what you can contribute to a team. Like, what do you feel like are your strengths in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a pretty vague word, but experience is probably the biggest thing that I can contribute to any team right now. Um, you know, there are a lot of players that are grinding, CS and Valorant. I wouldn't say they're grinding more than me, but they're probably at a better level right now individually than me. Um, Obviously, I think I can catch up in Valorant specifically. In CS, I'm a pretty good player right now. But I just don't think that a lot of people have been through kind of the tough times. I mean, some might, but I feel like I've been through the tough times a lot in the last 4 or 5 years, and I've learned so much. And I think that's like, you know, that's what I can help with is when you're rebuilding or how will we bounce back from losses? How do we handle uh what how do we handle winning? Like all those things I think are things that I've experienced in my career that could help any team.
Yeah, and I think we can definitely unpack some more of that stuff in terms of the experience, because like you say, it's having been through so many different things, and your career is super interesting in the sense that since the that that's I mean, I guess people are kind of used to this at this point, but that Cloud9 squad that won the Boston Major ended up sort of like you stayed on the roster for a while, I believe for like a couple years almost, trying to rebuild the roster and to try to like find that peak again in the roster. But I know it didn't sort of come together at all in the way that perhaps you all expected. But yeah, that roster kind of exploded. Well, exploded is a strong word, but it
Yeah.
disbanded after like Skadoodle, like he stopped playing professionally after the Boston Major win and all of that. So the roster just slowly sort of just like drifted apart and became something else. And I think it was really interesting from like looking from the outside to see all of these players that well, all of these players won a major. They were capable of winning a major. It's first NA team winning a major. So I think there's a lot of interest in seeing the path that everybody took. How did you feel about because I think in terms of hard times, it felt like that was a hard time because that was such a high, and then you're then sort of that grind to rebuild Cloud9. That must have been a pretty tough time. Can you like speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that I wish that I would have known is I wish I was a little bit more aware of like what we had on that team because things weren't perfect. But we were still figuring it out. We got together and I think our first like 6 tournaments, we got beat in the semifinal. I think the semifinals a few times, and then the quarterfinals a few times, and and we always lost to phase, and that was the only team that we lost to pretty much. And but we were having pretty good results for just adding in 2 players with Tarik and Rush. So I wish that I would have known what we had, and I wish that I could have just kind of told everyone on the team and made them aware of what we had on this team. Because after the major, I think it was pretty tough because people wanted to take different approaches. We had people who wanted to approach our success by kind of riding the high and just like playing at as many tournaments as we could. And then I specifically didn't want to do that. I wanted to kind of pace ourselves and like skip a few tournaments and then come back. And and then, we ended up playing a lot of tournaments and I think people got burnt out. Problems within the team, small problems, uh they just became bigger and bigger over time. And I think no matter what though, we could have made it work. We could have compromised, we could have talked about it. And when you have a team that is that good, like we didn't win everything, but we had potential to win a lot if we would have stuck together, if we would have like compromised a bit more, talked to each other a bit more. And yeah, when you have a team like that, um, it's like lightning in a bottle. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't happen often, and so you should do whatever you can to make it work. And that's like one of the biggest things that I learned from that time. Um, so yeah.
And I mean, what would be the qualities you think of that roster that were particularly special in terms of just because obviously it obviously hit such a high peak. So what made it
Mhm.
special?
Yeah, I mean, so I have a few like team structures that I've seen work. One is like I call it like the 2-3. I don't know if there are teams like this in Valorant. I'm not really too sure of people's personalities and team dynamics, but a lot of the tier 2 teams in NA, or sorry, not in NA, in CS, they have like this one leader who's giving a lot of direction, and then their right hand man, and the team is kind of controlled through these two people, and then you have other teams that are, I call it like a 1-3-1, kind of like in CS, but or like in Valorant, but it's where you have the leader, and then you have two more voices, and that's kind of what we had, and I think that's kind of what made us special too, because when you have two voices on the team and there's not like a huge clash, I think that is really really special. So like for instance, Tarik, he was our IGL, as people know from that time, and then me and Stu were kind of we were both secondary in-game leaders, and I think that all three of us did a really good job of kind of shaping out the plan and like calling without being complete control freaks. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like one thing that made that team really special is, when you look at the games where we're playing really well, there are all these like things happening at the same time and our game looks really dynamic. And that's honestly a really hard way to play. It's a hard way to improve. Uh because it's so random, you know what I mean? It requires multiple people knowing what to do in any given situation. And it's not a consistent way, as it's not like we won every tournament, but I think that's what made that team special, and if we could have found a way to add in some structure, add in some stability, I think that would have taken us to the next level. Um and yeah, just in terms of like the personalities, Tark was like really good at always making a decision, but also like going with whatever anyone wanted and then building off of it. So in the mid round, you know, if me and Stu didn't have a read for whatever reason, we didn't know what to do in the mid round, Tark would literally call him like, "You guys down to split B?" And then from there, it's like, "Okay, like let's split B. Like Scott, you smoke this. Will get ready to run out here on my flash." And then me and Stu kind of fill in the blanks. But then if me and Stu ever had a mid round call, then it would be, let's say I had a mid round call, then Stu and Tarek are now kind of taking over with the execution. So we had like people who could control the plan off of their, you know, reads or off of the info that they were getting, and then we had people who could control the actual execution of it and make it, make it work better.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's it kind of is reminiscent to me of that old Shocks quote when he was like hyping up his team, like five fingers of the
Yeah,
same hand, because it,
yeah,
it it does feel like every team that is able to win, it has that quality. Like it's just,
yeah.
maybe they didn't always have that quality, and maybe it's just for that tournament, but like, but that is something that appears, and that is something that like possesses the team to just be this singular organism effectively. And it's also looking at EG, who won champions recently. It also felt like, and I think just hearing them, talk about it in some of the interviews and stuff like that as well. Like I did a podcast with Ethan as well. It really sounds like they had exactly the same kind of thing going on. It's super dynamic. Like, it doesn't really matter that of course you can have all of this the set stuff, and you can have your playbook, and you know how to routinely drill these things and execute. But it's that stuff that comes in between all of that stuff, where you're all just interpreting the game and trusting each other and just reacting instantaneously, and you all know exactly what one another's going to do, so there's almost, the communication is almost not necessary to a certain degree. It's like that
Yeah.
that level of synergy is really like, I mean, it's so amazing to see, and it seems like winning like big tournaments, it's like you see that in the teams. And it's so interesting because you also said lightning in a bottle net. It does feel like that kind of thing too. It's like hard for teams to hold on to that.
Yeah.
Why do you think that might be?
Uh, I'm not too sure, honestly. Like, it was it was pretty weird. Because when we picked up Rush and Tarik, we instantly were pretty good. Like, it was. I mean, we also had the best players within the region for the most part, but we were instantly pretty good, and we were, you know, getting out of groups in a lot of tournaments, going to semis and quarters, like I was saying. And that was, like, instant. That was, like, maybe we had, like, a few weeks of practice, but that's not normal at all. And I think that was the real special part, was that, like, it just came natural. We were just able to play off each other. I don't know if you're familiar with, like, the triangle offense, or, like, well, yeah, I guess that's the main offense, but it's like an offense in basketball where pretty much, like, one decision makes, brings out, uh a bunch of different options for, like, the player next to him, and then depending on what option he picks, and the player next to him has all these options, and then it's like organized chaos,
Mm.
And we didn't have organized chaos. We were just chaotic, but it was working, like, if we could have found a way to organize it a bit more or structure it, it would have been really good in my opinion. And that's kind of what I was working on, but I wasn't smart enough at the time to understand really what was happening. And a lot of the CS teams, I don't think were were thinking too macro at that point. Um anyways, but yeah, I'm really not too sure like how to even replicate that. I mean, that's one of my, I think, faults later on in C9 we uh after we kind of disbanded, was that was the style I wanted to play. But you can't just like play that style with any team. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't work like that. You like, you can't just go into practice and then the goal of today's practice is let's just play off each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like there's nothing concrete. There's no plan of action really. And so I think, like, yeah, like I said, when you have that, you should obviously try to make it work. But when you don't have that, then just like don't even think about it. Like, it's not within the cards.
It's super interesting because there are definitely, I think it was actually through Jared Tenler's work that I felt like it helped to describe some of why these kinds of things happen. And it was, I forget the line, but there's like a line in his recent book, Mental Game of Trading, where he effectively says, the game is not different when you're playing a competition. It's you that is different, and
Yeah,
it's because of that pressure, and that the pressure, the way that it impacts you physiologically, allows you to either have higher peaks or lower lows, essentially, because all of your nervous system is so dialed up. You can't replicate that in a scrim. There's no way to replicate that outside of that environment. So it is almost this place where it's this totally untested thing where you guys just you're just all just able to exploit that in that moment, and you're able to use it to kind of go to a new peak in your gameplay, which you can't replicate out of that. Which it's I find it so interesting that and that might be part of the reason why it's hard to kind of hold on to that like lightning in the bottle, as it were, because it's a bunch of these things you can't really prepare for. And I feel like that's a lot of what being a pro is I'm gonna be the most prepared when I go into the tournament, by trying to be as disciplined as possible, and do all these things to make sure that that's how I play in the tournament. But then, yeah, there's an element of you changing in the tournament. And going back to that original point you mentioned about your experience, how do you feel like your ability to manage essentially the stress in tournaments has changed over time? Because obviously, by the time of the Boston Major, you're able to hit a peak with your team, and you're able to deliver the championship. So a lot of people go through their careers, and the opportunities they get when they get to that level, they aren't able to overcome the pressure to perform like that.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the pressure, like the approach that I took pretty so before TSM, I would say, or even on TSM, this is like maybe 2014, 2015. I was playing in like tier 2 NA and I knew that I was really good, but I was having problems showing it when it mattered for the exact reason that you said. And I remember when I joined TSM, I think I was like 18 or 19 at the time. I just told them, I want to speak to a sports psychologist. And at the time, I think they had I think his name's Weldon Green. I talked to him a few times. He recommended a few books, read the books. Um, and then, I joined C9 and they have a sports psychologist named David Denis, who, for those of you that were following my career in Valorant, he was the coach of T1. And I just like was working with him a lot. And yeah, I think I took a decent approach, which was I'm just gonna kind of numb myself. Like I'm gonna just try to be really cold and like I'm just gonna try to be like a cold killer. Like that's how I thought, you know, and that's what I did. And I practiced that every single day. Like in practice, if someone starts tilting, not even the other team or me, but like someone on my team, if they start tilting, they start getting mad, I'm just not like it's just I don't even hear it anymore. It's like background noise. You know what I mean? Like, if someone were to come, like, "What the fuck? There's 1B," I don't even hear the "what the fuck," I just hear the "there's 1B," and I consciously tried to work on that, like, every single day. If, let's say, like, I whiffed a kill, then I would just think to myself or I wouldn't even think to myself anything. I would just make the call. Like, I had a bad whiff, there's 1 out ladder or whatever, and that's it. And then I just, like, tried to be like that every single day. And eventually in tournaments, it started being that way where I whiff a kill, so what? Like I'm not even whatever. You know what I mean? It's the same as if he killed me uh first. Like or if he just hit a nice shot, I wouldn't be thinking all these things like fuck, I can't believe I whiffed that. I would just make the call out. And I that was kind of my process at the age of 19, 20. And it ended up working pretty well, I would say. I think I was like a pretty consistent performer and almost like throughout my whole career, honestly. I think I've been pretty consistent taking that approach. But then it wasn't until COVID and when I started opping um, that I tried to take a different approach where I felt like numbing myself and kind of like having that cold, stoic way of coping with the pressure. I felt like it was good for like making the range smaller, like making my highs and my lows, making them closer together. But eventually I realized or I felt that, you know, not using my emotions and kind of like not thinking about that is limiting my ceiling, so to speak. So I just thought like, it's not that I need to ignore my emotions or ignore the pressure. It's more that I have to like learn how to deal with it and embrace it. So I started trying to work on that a lot during COVID. And I think if you look at my games since then, you can kind of see that, I have some really bad games sometimes, but I also have some really good games. And then my average games are still a pretty good level. Um, so yeah, that was kind of my approach when it came to dealing with pressure and kind of understanding that like pressure isn't bad. Pressure is what can get you to the next level. And yeah, exactly what you said with the not being able to replicate it in scrims. That like once I started doing that, I actually like I had like a match mode, and I never had that before. Before it was just like, I was trying to treat it like any other day in practice. But I remember I was looking at my scrims from T1, and you look through the scrims, and I'm negative every month. Like they were tracking our KD, they were tracking our first kills. I was just red everywhere. And then if you look at the matches from T1, specifically when I started becoming a duelist, like the matches are way different than my match stats, or the matches are way different than my scrim stats. And that's why pretty much is that I just have this like I feel like I have this level that I can't really access um in scrims. But I'm trying to work on that too right now because I don't have any matches to play, so I'm trying to get that in ranked.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. It's actually a very similar development to myself, and I think there's a reason for that. I think especially when you're younger, it's really hard to understand how to deal with the emotions. So actually, kind of being kind of cold to them, like you described, is the easiest way to kind of manage it. And that because that was my approach too. And then I also came upon the same realization as well later on that it's if because the suppression of the emotions also can hide the mental game leaks that you have. So
Yeah.
although you can get a bit definitely a benefit, like you say, there's a higher ceiling you can get to if you take that like more optimized approach, but then it requires a lot of like awareness and a lot of understanding of various tools and just like starting to understand yourself more in almost a scary way. So it's a much higher burden of work that's required to level up your mental game there. So it's amazing though that you've achieved have achieved so much in your career. Like you've done so much really awesome stuff, and it's really cool to see that. And one reason I love talking to you is because I love sort of how you're a player that really cares about like trying to figure everything out. And I think that's really fun. Like I think that's I love nerding out about that kind of stuff. And with the mental game and talking about that kind of developmental path you've taken with it, what what do you think is like? What have been some of the more interesting? Are there any other interesting revelations you've had about the things you've learned about yourself and the way that you handle things, or that have come through now, kind of resensitizing yourself to your emotions when you're playing? Have you been surprised by anything?
Um, Not really when it comes to I mean, the biggest thing that came out of that is actually just my connection to my teammates. Like, in C9, we were all, friends with each other, but when I was competing, I didn't feel like I was, playing with my brothers. Like I know it sounds really
Right.
corny,
Yeah.
but we like, I don't know how my teammates felt, but just for me, it didn't feel like there was camaraderie. It felt like we're here to do a job. Let's fucking do the job and let's win. And then that was me trying to be cold because how can I ignore someone who's tilting or who like makes a bad comm if I'm so invested in them? You know what I mean? Like I can't just ignore what they say if I care a lot about them. So my way of dealing with it was to, he's just my teammate and we're just going to get this job done, but he's not necessarily, my close friend or my, you know, someone that I'm going to war with, as cliche as that sounds. And I think that once I started to try to embrace all these things that we talked about, I think that was the biggest thing that changed was now, I'm competing with people that I really care about. And it sucks when they like if someone rages or if I'm mad at them, it sucks because I care about them now. I feel really close to them. But it also makes it so when you win or if you have success, it makes it so much sweeter. So I think that's like kind of the biggest learning from all this for me is that it's really about the people, like who I choose to surround myself with, who I choose to play on a team with. Like I want to be close to them. I want to be, friends with them. I want to feel like when we're playing out there, like we're playing for each other. You know what I mean? Like I have his back, he has mine, and I think it hasn't really paid off yet. I haven't really had uh results since I've started feeling this. I mean, maybe it's wrong, but it makes it all worth it. Even if we're losing, it doesn't really matter to me because I feel like a lot of my teammates, I'm still close with them even months or years after we've been teammates. Um, which is I think, something that's really important.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's such a good point because you're like the level of like meaning, like where you find meaning
yeah,
is really important when in anything. Like it's something I talk to people about with like as one of the many areas of, like the mental game is like, why are you doing what you're doing? It's like actually super important to have like that vision and those goals, and why does it feel fulfilling? Like why is it meaningful? And so for you to say that it's like you're basically saying like by being more emotionally invested you increase the level of meaning in your
yeah,
life with what you're doing, and that's going to make you focus more. It's going to make you want to put in the extra hours. It's going to make you want to be more empathetic to your teammates, which lifts them up, which lifts the whole team up. It's I think super insightful, honestly, like what you're talking about there, because that is something I've seen in lots of teams, and the lack of that emotional connection can oftentimes be what will defeat that team ultimately. Because when they experience hard times, everyone's in that internalized mode as opposed to finding ways to deal with it together. And because they're like maybe being too cold towards their emotions, they're just trying to like handle it and numb themselves. But what about your teammates? Like what they're going through? Like someone needs to be the leader right now. Someone needs to be able to kind of be that social glue in the team. And so I've seen a lot of teams just like fall apart because of that. And I've been on teams where they fall apart because of that. And it's so difficult to be in that environment. And that I think that kills a lot of teams as well. So um
yeah,
um and I think with Dapper we talked about like the the social glue, the the people that are the social glue of the team. Um and I think what you said also about that Cloud9 roster, which is interesting, and I've seen this, and maybe people could say this about the EG roster that recently won too, is that oftentimes it seems like the team that everyone expects to win, like oftentimes there's so many teams
they
that just
never win.
yeah, like exactly, yeah, because on
Yeah,
paper it's like, oh, they've got like the best players, but there's so much more to winning. Um, and I think what you're saying has like a lot to do with that, and a lot to do with the team culture too, which is it's a pretty difficult thing to pin down on a lot of teams. But what have you thought? Like, how do you feel about the idea of team culture? Like when you're on a team, you're super invested. It's your profession. It is
yeah,
the outcome is directly tied to whether you can feel like you're successful or not in your life endeavor, like whether it means something. So it's got to feel like that environment's got to feel super important. So like what have you learned about like team culture over the years? Are there some things that have become like non-negotiables for you now? Like how do you manage team culture as a player?
hmm. I mean, it's a tough question. I don't have like a list or anything. Um, but really, what matters to me when it comes to team culture is just that people are just trying their best to like improve themselves. People are trying their best to, give it their all when we're practicing. And I don't mean like, I mean, I'm sure you've heard of it, but yeah, I don't mean like give 100% every day. I just mean, give whatever you have for that day. So if you have like 80% for some reason, give, 100% of 80, and that's fine with me. Um, and I think, uh, just being really present, when we're practicing together. Like in the matches, obviously I've played with a few players where I feel like they're really different in the matches compared to practice, which is tough, but you're practicing a lot more than you play matches. So if they're able to do that every day in in practice, then I just always think back to like when I was on the teams, in 2014, 2015, and I couldn't show it in matches. And I just, you know, try to tell them what I would have wanted to hear at that point. And so yeah, I mean it's a lot about effort for me. It's not about like, who's really skilled or who is really smart or anything like that. It's just mainly about effort. And I feel like if you have good enough people who give a lot of effort, then you'll eventually get pretty good. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of like the biggest thing I would say for team culture. I mean, there are other things, but I think those are the biggest.
Yeah, it's it's interesting too because you're over the years, obviously, as you get older as a player, as you said, you've got so much experience. I feel like you must, any team that you enter now, you must like you're automatically the veteran presence and someone that everyone should automatically, no pun intended, look at as either the example or someone that could hold them accountable. And having like standards like holding people accountable to is definitely pretty important when it comes to like successful teams. I think. Is Are there any particular standards that you haven't mentioned that are like super important to you? Whether that's like just showing up on time, because I know like
Oh,
every team has like these like different issues.
hmm. I would say, yeah. I mean, showing up on time, that for sure is like a big thing. I mean, if you're like 1 minute to 5 minutes late, then okay, like I can. If it's every day, oh, it might become a problem. But I can. I have to like pick my battles. You know what I mean? It's like sometimes it's not worth it to bring that up if there's like a bigger problem that I want to bring up. Um, but no, not no real standards other than to like not talk shit behind people's backs. Like that's probably the only thing that I didn't bring up. But that's like one that was a thing in CS. Early on in my career that I feel like every team or every player did is like they would Steam message people about their teammates, and those people weren't even on their team. Like I think that
Lame,
if
lame.
yeah, yeah, that's really lame. That's honestly like if anyone's watching and you're doing that, like, don't do that. You can talk about, like, team problems, like, "Oh, yeah, we suck on Sea Haven, like, we can't hold this for whatever reason." Okay, I don't think that's talking shit. But if you're saying like, "Oh, yeah, our Omen is so bad, he doesn't," that I think needs to not happen. Um if you talk within your team, yo, our Omen, I feel like he needs to do this differently. What do you think? Just to confirm that, you're not crazy. I think that's a little bit more acceptable, but obviously, like, it's about your intentions. And I can't tell you what your intentions are, only you can. So if you're, talking shit about your teammate and your intention is to talk shit, then that's kind of fucked up, you know? Um, but yeah, that would be my only other, that's like a huge, like, if that ever happens, that's just not good. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
that's the only other thing.
Yeah, that's definitely a super problematic behavior to have in any team. So I mean, to me, that's like something. If I see someone doing that kind of stuff, I'm like, okay, you got one chance, you're instantly cut if you do that shit again. And the reason is simply because it's just like if you have time to complain because to other people, it means you're not you could be solving that problem with your team. You could be looking at that like you're completely
Yeah,
looking at everything in completely the wrong way, in a very disingenuous way. And it also indicates that player is looking for something to blame, which also is a very counter to improving as a player, because you're
yeah,
not instead trying to solve the problem, which is like that's something we always try to like really encourage as a message. Whereas always in like problem solving mode, because if you decide to be on it, like don't bother to be on a team if you're not going to solve problems with them.
Yeah.
There's just so many issues with that kind of behavior. So it's yeah. In fact, if if you're someone that does that kind of thing, go read Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willing. I think that's a really good book to indicate
Yeah.
just like quite how you should behave. Instead to give the best results for yourself and for your team as well. So yeah, don't be doing that shit. PSA, little PSA there.
I mean, yeah, that's like one thing that I was doing when I was like 14. I remember I was kind of in the same stage that I'm in right now where all I'm doing is playing ranked. And back then it was CS Pugs and I was 14. And I remember like I would, blame my teammates all the time. And then one day I just thought like, I'm never gonna play with these guys. Like if I play 10 games within a day, I'm gonna be playing with the, 50 different players or whatever. So what's the point of me complaining about 50 different people? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it
Yeah.
just makes no sense because, I tell this guy, or let's say I die because someone didn't flash for me and I get mad. Oh, this guy, he's so bad he didn't know to flash for me. That, even if I tell him, yo, next time flash for me, it's not gonna change anything, because I'm not gonna play with him the next game. So instead is I need to think more is my fault. Like I didn't tell him to flash for me. I didn't tell him to do this, you know? Or let's say someone doesn't calm something and I'm thinking, fuck, like this guy didn't tell me that this was open. Like these guys are horrible. Like that's what I would be thinking back then when I was 14. But then, eventually I learned that that's not his fault. I mean, even if it is his fault, what does it matter? I should just try to be more aware of the openings. And if I see that it's an opening, then I should just play for it, and I think having that kind of mentality where basically I'm not the victim of my teammates, like whatever happens in the game, like that's on me, like having that kind of mentality, I think helped me a lot, like when I was just grinding pugs. And that's something that I'm trying to do even to this day. That's something that I've tried to do throughout my whole entire career. Obviously, when you play on a team, it's a little bit different because, you know, those things do matter. But strictly when you're playing in pugs and stuff like that, I think that's like a good mentality that you should take or that you should have is, it's on you. Even if oh, the B like I play A and the B player can't hold his sight and I'm just always having to retake. Well, focus on retaking better. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you don't just have to run out and die every single time you have to retake. Like try to win some gunfights, figure out the best way to do it. And that will improve you way more than like, oh, I just always need a good B player. Um, so yeah, another little PSA, but
Yeah, man. Hey, we can just turn the whole podcast into like correcting ranked behaviors. But I mean, a lot of these things though are really interesting because they do indicate other like issues that player might have. Just but because like you're saying, like if you're playing the victim, well, oh man, that's like a huge amount of shit that you're suddenly not learning from, or you're because you're
yeah,
deciding that that is somebody else's faults. You're not looking for the lesson, and that also I think indicates what that person's what their like vision is for what they're doing. So, for example, if there are lots of people that only care about their ranked rating, for example, like the elo that they're winning or losing, and so those people are going to get mad at fucking everything because
yeah,
because it's like an outcome that you don't have a lot of control over. And so that's another issue too, like the illusion of control. Is like a lot of stuff you cannot control. So it's way better to recognize that and to get the max value out of the stuff that's happening. And so
yeah,
like the minimap example you used actually is a really good one because I think that's like a very common one in ranked because in ranks like this is the other thing too, like you have like there's no one signed any contract. There's no contract that anyone
yeah,
signed when they went into a rank game that they're gonna com perfectly, that they're gonna do this. Like that person might be having a shit day. They might be playing Valorant because it's their escape and they're like a pretty good player and maybe they don't want to com in this match. Maybe they're kind of like tilted and they shouldn't be playing. I mean, it doesn't. None of that stuff actually matters. The whole point is that the only time you can have really expectations and like a kind of like a social contract, as it were, is if you're on a professional team. And then, yeah, you do have standards, you do have expectations you can hold each other to. But in that environment, it's completely random. And that's actually kind of a benefit because,
yes,
yeah, like
exactly.
you get all these opportunities, like you're saying, oh, someone can't hold the site. So now I get to practice, trying to handle this particular problem and situation. Or, oh, I have to look at the mini map way more. And I find this is actually really interesting because I think people get lazy and they don't understand like how you can actually improve skill in like so many different areas at once. And like Asuna is a really good example of someone that looks at the mini like as the reason why he's amazing in ranks. You know, the guy like looks at the mini map more than I think anyone else I've encountered as far as I understand it in pro play. Like he looks at the mini map a lot. And that's a skill because you have to like understand all of the moments you can do it. You take that snapshot of information, but then you have like the most updated information all the time. You don't have to rely on your teammates to have perfect comms, and they're not always going to. But also at the same time, you get other benefits. So there is skill to be increased there. So just be honest with yourself. You just want to be lazy. Just be honest about it.
Yeah.
Like you're not gonna want to look at the mini map more and in ranked. Of course.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I mean, this is pretty much like, in my opinion, if you're gonna take, gaming really seriously, I feel like this is just an approach that probably most good players do to some extent. I mean, no one's perfect. They probably like, I mean, even me, like I'm saying that I've tried to do this since I was 14. I'm not perfect. I sometimes mess up, but it's about trying to do it majority of the time, and you'll yeah, eventually you'll improve with this mentality, in my opinion. And then also what you said about like ranked being, there are no standards in ranked. It's random. That is like why I'm playing ranked right now. Like for the last 2 years, I've been, on a pro team. I I've been very much trying to control all the scenarios that we get ourselves into, which is kind of the point, right? When you're playing at a high level, is that you want to be in as many advantageous situations as possible. And if they're not advantageous, you want it to be at least a fair game where now it comes down to just, doing things well and like just killing them. And my mind has been so like focused on macro and like well, that's the main thing, is just macro and team play, that I've lost that kind of uh fluidity like when it comes to just playing.
yeah, yeah,
Um
yeah.
And in rank, that's like the one place that you can really like practice that. That's where it comes, like the best players in ranked are players that don't force anything. It's like, let's say like you want to the team is hitting your site and you want to flash through a smoke and like fight them, right? But you don't have a smoke down. So I'll give a more specific example so people can understand. Let's say like you're hiding in the heaven smoke on split on A, and the other team is obviously hitting you, and you want to flash out the smoke and fight them, but no one smoked A main for you. So it's going to be harder for you to do it, right? Because they could just be holding you from far and like you won't flash them. Well, a good ranked player, they won't just make that move unless, they have a teammate on site or like, they're playing off of someone. But a bad ranked player will just do it regardless, and then, sometimes go 1 for 1, sometimes just die and not even get a chance to shoot. And like it's in those moments where you can like think to yourself consciously like, "Oh, I can't do this move. Okay, like we'll just play retake." And it's like no big deal. I can't do the move that I want because we don't have a smoke down A main, but like I'll just go to the next thing now. Like I'll just forget about that and adjust my plan. And I think like when we talk about like adaptable players, I think that's you know a good example. In If I'm playing on a team, then I'm always thinking, yo, you gotta smoke A main, they're hitting A, like we gotta nade this, flash here, and then we can come out and fight and flood. And that's like, perfect team play. But that's not gonna happen in ranked. So you have to be able to adjust.
I love that. I love that point. Actually, it's especially because it's something that I've experienced when I was like playing Quake professionally too. Like there's this sense of attachment sometimes to making certain plays, and like
Yeah.
when the situation changes because of that like it's an emotional attachment you get to that play. That's like the play that's going to get you back into the game. That's the play that's going to allow you, like you've crafted this advantage, and like you just get invested in it. And the reason can be all sorts of things, but the point is that you can get kind of attached to it, and then you stop like updating yourself with what okay, all this new information is coming in, stuff that would actually probably completely change the formula. Like in Quake, it might be that, oh, I that guy hit some extra damage in a spot where I didn't expect when I made this play. I'm in the position to make the play. fuck it, I'm gonna go for it anyway. Like
Yeah.
that's so tempting, but again, it's like you want to be in that more detached mode there, where it's like, okay, I'm just always updating for information. I'm trying to always make the best play. I'm just taking in the information. I don't care if someone missed a smoke, or if someone did this or that. I'm just making the best possible play for right this second. And that's actually
Yeah.
really hard to like actually
It's
play
hard
like
to
that.
do.
It's actually really hard to do it. And I think there are some players, like you said, that are just super good at just. I think you described it pretty well. Like just the best ranked players are the players that like let the game kind of come to them in a sense, as opposed to trying
Yeah.
to force the game. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that me and my, sports psychologist, David Denis, that one of the things we talked about, like, pretty early on in my career, like, I was always looking at Tarik and always trying to see, like, why is Tarik so good in ranked? Like, I mean, back then there was no rank, but back then there was, like, FPL or, Rank S, and he
Yeah.
was really good. And me and my sports psychologist were talking about it, and he just said, Tarik is always improvising. He's always improvising. And he said that there's a rule in improv, like actual acting improv, where you can't say no. You always
Mm.
have to go yes and. So like you want to split B? Yes, and smoke top con, smoke window or whatever. And Tarik is like always in that mode. He's never like trying to uh, derail the team in any way. He's always just adding on and adding on, and that's like, in my opinion, why he's so good in ranked is because he's always in that mindset that we're talking about, where he's always like adapting and he's not attached to any one play that he likes to do or any move that he wants to make. And yeah, I mean that's like those I mean, this kind of brings up another point that I wanted to say about the team dynamics, but I think, like, players who can do that are really important. Like, that's one thing that I learned a lot as well after my rebuild or my rebuilding on C9 was that, like, instead of always trying to pick, like, the best answer or pick the best strats, I'll just, like, go with whatever strat is called and just make it work, you know? Um, and yeah, sorry, I don't know why I brought that up, but it felt relevant.
Oh,
Uh,
100%.
yeah,
No, I mean, I think these are like really, really good points because it is like very hard to have that adaptable approach. It is genuinely a skill. And like as you're talking about Tarek, it was actually really cool because I worked at an event recently, the Ludwig Tarek Invitational, and we actually, I think, I'm not sure who brought it up, whether it was Mimi or Sean. But they brought up just like how Tarek was communicating in general, and just like, oh, this must be one of the reasons why you were a good IGL, because you're able to just kind of really like, you don't just shut down anything. You'll be like, even if you
yeah,
disagree
never.
with it, you won't shut it down. You'll like ask a question about it and try and actually develop that thing. So and
Yeah,
that's like that collaborative attitude. Plus, there's like a sense of a lack of ego there too, because you're not saying I have the best idea or it has to be my way. You're saying let's collaborate. Like, I want to know more. Let's okay cool. Let's yeah. I love that point. I think that's an absolutely excellent point, because especially in ranked, I've come across so many players that they've been on YouTube. Yeah, they've they've like learned these setups and they're like, I'm going to use this setup no matter what. Even fuck the rest of my team. Like, that's a more extreme example, but there are lots of players that only want to play their way, and the skill of playing with everybody else is undervalued, I think. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's like like in ranked, like to me, there are no bad I mean, okay, there are bad situations, but what I mean is like someone will call like, yo, I think we should rush B, and then someone will say like, no, they're gonna be stacked B, like we should work mid. And to me, like even if they're stacked B, honestly, I kind of just want to go B anyways. And it's like, okay, they're stacked B, so how do we have this inkling, how do we make it work? Like maybe we should throw extra mollies in the smoke so they can't flood. Maybe we should, dart close, because if they're just no one's going to be stacked in the back of the site, they're going to fight us close if they're stacked, and it's like small little things like that it helps you learn how to deal with different issues that you might come up with in game. But if you're always looking for like oh, we want to hit the site where there's only one guy, it's just a guessing game at that point. You know what I mean? And you're also way more readable too if you're always trying to think in that way. But yeah, I mean, to go back to Tarik, that is definitely something that he's really good at. Is just all like there are very few times I can remember where Tarik will like shut down an idea and just say like, "No, I think we should do this." But if he does do that, he's probably right. You know what I mean? Most of the time he would do that, it would be more like when he wants to do something aggressive. So like let's say we want to play like a default CT side setup or whatever, but he's not feeling that for some reason. He'll just say, "Yeah, I just want to push mid. Can you guys like do this for me?" And then we just do it. And he always had a really good feeling for that. But but yeah.
That's super cool. That's really cool because it's like it's just so interesting with like these personality dynamics on teams and just having the ability to have like a really like solid intuition and like and everyone like trusts and respects you and that you're able to like call stuff on the fly in that way and also having like someone on that's like the team that's always making stuff work. It just I feel like you're just never gonna feel like uncomfortable if you know what I mean, because some teams feel really uncomfortable being more dynamic like that and playing off of intuition, but that's like really super important at the absolute elite level. You have to be able to do that. And so I wonder like how many teams are kind of blocking their own ability to play intuitively, kind of like for the reason like you were talking about before, where when you're a pro player in a team, you're trying to optimize every edge and make sure you're doing everything right and everything like so many things are like drilled and disciplined. And so you can kind of like the potential loss or trade off can be that, well, let's what about just playing intuitively, like feeling the game out.
Yeah.
That's a tough thing to. Is there a way do you feel like to like or I should say it like this, how do you what are the moments where you feel like you have your intuition is firing the best? Like how do you build like good intuition for the game?
So I mean, I'll explain it like this. I For me personally, I feel like once I know the idea of the round, like the macro pretty much, I can figure out all the small details, and that's where my intuition kind of kicks in. Like um if we're gonna B split and I'm the guy going B main, so I'm like weak side, then I kind of know how I'm supposed to play that. Oh, this guy darted here, he might be close to me. I'll use my util more defensively, so then I can find out if he's pushing me, and then if he's pushing me, then my teammates can go. And so once I know the macro, I feel like that's giving me like if you think of like a coloring book, that's giving me like the lines, and I can just draw within the lines in whatever colors I want. You know what I mean? Because I kind of know the goal of the round. That's how I think of it. Some people are the opposite. Some people they know all the little micro things, but they don't know how to put it together in like in that picture. You know what I mean? Or they don't know how to put it together in a cohesive plan. Um, but just for me, that's how I think I operate best. Obviously, like really good players have both. They they understand the plan. They understand all the micro things. And they're just good players off of intuition. But just for me, when I'm trying to improve it, that's always the approach that I take. Is like, what is my role within the round? Like, what are my responsibilities? Okay, these are my responsibilities. Done. Like, I'll figure it out from there. Um, and that's always been kind of like that's also given me good feedback too. Like, if I don't know how to do it, then when I'm watching, a VOD or a demo, guess what I'm looking at? I'm looking at people that are in that scenario that I'm in and seeing how they deal with it. Um, and yeah, I think that's like that's been my process for improving for like a lot of years.
Has I'm like switching up the gears slightly. What do you feel like have been what are the moments that you're most proud of in your career so far? Because you've had a pretty long career. Obviously, you've been through lots of ups and downs. Boston Major, we already talked about how much of a high point that is, but that's only one kind of moment in your career so far. So if how do you feel about your career?
I feel like there's a lot more to come. Obviously the Boston Major is like a really proud moment for me, but thinking back, like T1 was also a really proud moment for me in Valorant. Um, I think that was like one of the highlights of my career, even though we didn't achieve anything. Just for me, how I felt on the team. I felt like I put a lot of the things that we're talking about to use, and I applied it on those teams. An example is when I was playing with Dazed, he's obviously someone who's thinking a lot about the big picture. He like my first call with him, he had a 6-month plan. He knew the comps that we were gonna run. He knew the game plans that he wanted to implement, and that's what drew me to T1 in the first place was talking to Dazed. And I think that if I hadn't gone through all these rebuilds, eventually when we started losing, I would have maybe tried to change his plans too much. I would have tried to derail the team. But because I had the experiences rebuilding, I figured that I need to just help him make his plan work. So whatever was going wrong, I would give him feedback, and then I would try to come up with a better way that we could do it so that his plan could work better. And I think we only had like 2 or 3 months together on T1, which really sucks because that was like a really fun time because every day we were coming on to practice. We had, our intentions for the day, our goals. And then it felt like every day we were being pretty productive. And we were learning a lot. And that was just so fun for me. And on top of that, all the team culture stuff that we talked about earlier, it was really like it was there. You know what I mean? Like I felt close to everyone on that team. And so that was like a pretty proud moment for me. And then also after that, when I don't want to go too much into detail, but basically, Days got cut. I was pretty pissed about that. Um, and then we had to kind of make do with what we had. So we picked up Brax and Dawn, and we didn't have an IGL. So Curry decided that he was going to IGL, and then I started playing Duelist. And I felt like I was able to control a lot of the team and kind of like apply the things that I'm saying right now when it comes to how the team operates. Uh, and then on top of that, uh, we haven't really talked about this that much, but all the sports psych stuff. Obviously, I was playing Jet Op and Raze, so I was playing Duelist, and that's like a role that has a lot of pressure on them. There are a lot of eyes on you if you're not performing as a duelist. And like I mentioned earlier, my stats in scrims were not good. So the whole time I was like, "Fuck, should I be playing Duelist? Like, should I be opping right now when I got Ska on the team? Should I be playing Raze when I got Curry on the team, who's always placing like top 10 in rank, so he's good." Um, and all those things, I had to deal with all that stuff, and and it wasn't easy, but because I had all the experience and all the lessons that I've learned, I was able to really make use of it. I think you were casting back when I was on Gen G and I was opping, right? I
I
think
think
you were
so.
still
Yeah.
casting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds right.
Yeah, so I don't know if you remember, but at that time I was getting a lot of like negative criticism about me opping because I wasn't playing necessarily too well at the start. I had Kusa on my team who should have been opping because he was a really talented opper and he was playing really, really, really well at that time.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That
And
was the storyline in CS:GO too. Like he's on
yeah,
teams when he like never opened. Everyone's like, I don't understand. Like, but yeah. Sorry.
yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so during that time, I was going through a lot of this stuff, and I didn't know how to deal with it. Like I had people. Uh, Normally I don't read what people say, but for some reason, because I was playing so bad, I like had to look at it for some reason. So so I was looking at people telling me that I shouldn't op. I was listening to what the analysts were saying about my opping and all this stuff, and I felt so like I couldn't handle it. Like I didn't know what to do. Um, and at the same time, this was during a period of my career where I was exploring kind of the what we were talking about with not being so cold, like trying to embrace more of my teammates, trying to embrace more of my emotions. And my emotions weren't good at this point. So it was really difficult, but I guess it's good to get all the hardest things out of the way first. But yeah, like eventually I was able to pull through, and I was playing pretty well during my time in Gen G after the first few months or whatever. And yeah, I go on to T1 and I'm hopping on Jet, and it's kind of the same thing. People are like, people are saying, why is Tim on Jet? Like, it's so different than how he normally plays. He's normally like a methodical lurker, is kind of the narrative around my play style. And I felt like I played Jet and Raze pretty well. And it was because, I could basically tell myself all the things that I wish I would have known during my opping days on Gen G.
Nice. The evolution.
Yeah.
That's it's no, it's awesome. It again. It's also cool again because like it never stops. It never
Yeah,
stops.
never.
And I know like now as well that as something that you've been talking about is like aim training too, and this is of course something that I think really, to be honest, only within the last year, since I think Voltaic started the AMP program, have people understood that, oh, actually there is a bit more. It's kind of like, we sort of understand the tip of the iceberg in terms of what aim training has to offer and what the applications are. Like, I think logically a lot of people are like, okay, I kind of get it in theory, but I have no idea how the application of this works to actually convert on edges. And most people don't think the edges for pro players are going to be in aim training, because if to get to that level in the first place, you probably have pretty sick aim. So I'm curious what your experience is with this so far, and what your thoughts are about aim training and if it's changed over time.
Yeah, so I started aim training in 2020. When I started opping, I started aim training. Or actually, I think it was 2019 when I was on C9 and I switched to opping. And I started aim training. I was following, I think it was Aimer7. He has like
Oh
this
yeah,
PDF out,
yeah.
and I like read through the whole thing, and at that time, I was opping, but I was practicing tracking. And the reason why was because for some reason, when I would see a model, I would just like freak out. Like I would just I don't know, like if you could see my heart rate, it would probably spike up and I would just like instant try to flick, you know? And I felt like the tracking just helped me stay calm in those moments because, the target is moving super fast obviously and you're trying to stay on them um I don't know. I don't know the science behind it, but that's just what I did and I noticed improvements. And then on top of that, like obviously your you have to work on being smooth, in tracking scenarios. But, yeah, the reason why I started aim training back then was just because I had a problem, with my opping that I could see, and I didn't know how to fix it, so I didn't know how to fix it within CS, so I just looked at aim trainers, and I tried to figure out what I needed, and I just looked at the guide, and, the guide if you look at any guide, they'll say, like, Valorant and CS is, very click timing based, but I just felt like that's not really what I needed. I needed to, like, learn how to track better. So that's, like, the first thing that I did, and then eventually I went to T1 and I reached out to Bardos, who works at Aim Labs, um, and I reached out to him for coaching, and he was too busy with Aim Labs, so he referred me to someone named Trusty Mix, and then I worked with him for a few months, and we were going pretty hard at it. Like, he would, like I would send him a VOD of me aim training. I have the hand cam and everything. We would talk a lot, and and yeah, I felt like I got better. And then now I'm about to start Amped with Voltaic, and I'm gonna be working uh with Mini,
Oh,
so that's
sick.
gonna be exciting. Yeah, and so yeah, I mean, I think the hardest part for me was just staying consistent because you like the way that I did it was that I would grind it for a few months and I would go really hard. Then eventually I actually would improve a lot, but then I would stop. And then eventually, old habits or, new faults would come up in my aim and I would have to start it all over again, and I think if I could do it all over, I would just be more consistent instead of going so hard doing 2 sessions a day, hour sessions each time. Uh, I would just do like 30 minutes a day and just do it all the time though, which is what I'm trying to do now. But I definitely feel like aim training is really important. I think it's gonna be the same as like, an NFL player or if you ask like any professional athlete if they go to the gym, like they're all gonna say yes. You know what I mean? Every athlete goes to, even golf players go to the gym, you know? And I feel like it's gonna be the same for aim training. Like at some point, if you're not doing that, you're just like slacking. And even if you're really good at aiming already and you haven't done it, you know, aim training can just help you stay sharp throughout your whole entire career, and it can maybe increase the longevity of your career because if you're 20 or if you're 18 now and you have insane aim, if you want to have a long, long career, like I'm talking like past 30, like I think you should be aim training every day. Um, Whereas if you didn't aim train, maybe, by the time you're 25, 26, 27, maybe your aim starts to decrease and or get worse, and that's when you want to start. And I think it's better if you just do it all from the beginning.
It's definitely super interesting because I think it's like because a lot of again there's a lot of preconceived notions I think on it, and like so many people say I'll just play the game, and it makes intuitively I think like if you look at some of the outcomes it can make sense. Like has did simple get as good as he did playing game trainers? No, he played the game shitloads. Like, and you can apply that to basically almost all pros. Yeah, 99.9% of the time they spend is to get good at a game is playing the game. And so I think people look at that and they're like, well, why do you need an aim trainer then? And it's interesting because what I usually say is, I like your gym example too. With the aim trainers, you can it's a lot of it's not about just grinding. It's about intelligently practicing intentionally to correct technique because you remove all the clutter. Like you remove all the decision making that you have in a game. You remove so much stuff, and you can just see in the clearest way how your technique looks in different like mouse control skills. So whether it's like micro adjustment or like tracking or like whatever it might be, you can see like the most distilled version of your technique, and so then you're able to kind of like more easily understand what the leaks are, and then if you need to correct a technique or something. And how do you correct a technique? Well, you have to do the better technique and focus on doing the better technique and repeat it. And I think you already mentioned it. If you don't do that, you revert back to your old
Yeah.
habits because you've ingrained those. So you got to like keep on top of the corrected technique. And that's most people get to a ceiling because they'll learn aiming by just playing, and they know like no they didn't start out with learning any aim theory. I think like what you said about like the future, I agree with you. I think a lot of people will there will be aim coaches on all the pro teams. I think there'll be aim coaching in programs that like collegiate programs, like getting people earlier so that when they pick up a mouse for the first time, they kind of like, oh yeah, this is like the theory. This is like some of the theory behind flicking technique. These are like the types of ways you train flicking technique, and people are going to do that, and it's going to coincide with them like as early players, like learning how to do all that stuff in a more corrected way. I think you're right with that. I think people are gonna way more people are gonna be doing it over time. So yeah, it's cool to hear that you're on the AMP program too and getting to work with Minnie. I worked with him for 4 weeks on like a smaller version of AMP because I wanted to because they reached out to me because they wanted to like sell because the AMP program is about selling it to pro players
Mm,
ultimately, and they wanted to talk to me because I was GMing 100Ds at the time, and I was like, okay, I'll try the program. Let me try the program. I want to see if it's legit, and then I can more easily perhaps potentially sell it to the players. But no promises because players are pretty resistant, and you got to have buy-in. And that's when I kind of got introduced to Mini and everything they were doing. I was like, oh, these guys have like formalized this in a way that I totally was surprised by. I didn't realize it was gonna be so kind of professional, their approach to it. So yeah, cool to see that you're getting into it and getting on that program. I can't wait to hear the feedback after you've gone through the program with Mini. Um, with that said, are there any other things in your game that you're working on at the moment, or ways you're kind of looking to improve it? Because now you're in the downtime, so the best time to maybe
yeah.
change stuff.
Yeah. I think well, just real quick with the what you said about, people saying like, "Oh, just play the game," Simple played the game and that's how he got good. I think that's like a really bad mentality that a lot of up and comers have, is that they just see what the best player did and they just copy what the best player did. Like, I think there has to be some level of self-awareness and also trust to to basically diagnose your own issues. You know what I mean? It's like when I was opping and and I'm reading through these guides and I'm listening to, or I'm trying to understand, everything about aim training. I didn't just, oh, like I need to get better at click timings because I'm playing CS. Okay, let me just do that. No, I referred back to, you know, my experiences in CS and what I was having issues with, and then I did a tracking scenario, or I did a tracking routine, even though that's not really, something that you should do. for CS or for Valorant. And so I basically just think that those players, they obviously you have to play the game. Let me just get that out of the way. You obviously have to play the game. But I think that you should think a little bit about your own game and try to understand where you're weak. And then from there, try to get better. Like that's one question I get a lot in my chat is people will ask me, "Oh, like I'm hard stuck, immortal. Like what should I do to get radiant?" I'm like, I have no clue. Like I've never seen you play. Like only you have seen yourself play. So maybe you should figure out what you want to get better at and then ask me about that. Like oh yeah, I'm having trouble with like my gunfights. Any tips? And then, okay, maybe I can give you some feedback on that, or you could look it up yourself because now you understand what you're weak at. So yeah, that's one thing that I would say. Like if you're aim training all the time and you have sick aim, but you never can use it, maybe yeah, maybe playing more ranked will do you some good because then you can get in more scenarios and you could try to figure out how to use your aim better. Or maybe you should watch some VODs. You know, if you're just whiffing a lot of kills then maybe hit the aim trainers, and it's really, in my opinion, about like not exactly copying someone, but just doing what you need to do to get better.
Yeah. Yeah, like figuring it out. I
Yeah.
did a video recently about like the 4 stages of competency. If you're
Oh
familiar with
yeah.
that, and
Yeah.
it's like the bottom rung of that is like, okay, well you're shit and you don't know why, and then the one above that is you're shit and you understand like kind of what you're shit at, and so that's like what you're talking about, and then it's the step up from that is the analysis. It's like, okay, I got to figure out, okay, now I know I'm shit at these things. How do I solve those problems? And then
Yeah.
you get further up the competency ladder essentially. And that is something that a lot of people tend to be a bit resistant to. It's pretty interesting because it is very very hard, and something Mini said in the podcast with him, actually, the aim training Mini, not Fnatic Mini. I've yet to do a
Mhm.
podcast with him sometime in the future maybe, but he is saying, he thinks that the talent really is, like, if you're going to say, what's a talented aim training player, or player really in general, is who is discerned by their ability to diagnose themselves, by
Yeah.
having the awareness to be able to look at what they're doing and then figure out what the problem is what he said. That's the talent that's going to get you to be sick at pretty much anything. And I agree with that in a lot of ways. I think that's like one of the hardest parts. I know as a player for myself too, I hit lots of barriers because I just didn't have the capacity to analyze things, because I spent my whole like career of like I got to like a very good level by copying people, but not copying
That's
people and
interesting.
analyzing how it works, but being like, okay, stuff's not working, like what can I copy now? And I just didn't have the ability to think critically, to understand principally why things weren't working. And so then I was just stuck. I'm like, okay, I'm pretty good, but I'm just totally stuck now.
That
um
yeah. That's so funny you bring that up because ever since I was 14, I that was my process, was copying people. Like, I remember I was 14 and on every map, well, back then you could pick what map you wanted to play in Pugs. So let's say I wanted to play Inferno, I would just look. I wouldn't even look at pro teams. I would look at puggers, like people that only played pugs. And I would look at the best ones and then I would just download 10 demos of Inferno and I would just watch one guy, and I just watched everything that he did, every like strafe he made, every like how he placed his crosser, how he was taking map control, how he was, taking his fights. I just watched 10 demos of it. And I played Inferno for like a week, and then I just did exactly what he did. And then over time, I just iterated on it. I think that's actually like a good skill that I have is that if you do anything to me in ranked, I'll learn how to use it and then I'll like eventually make it better once it's time to make it better. Um, but anyways, yeah, that's basically what I did. And I did that for every single map. I did that with multiple different players. And then it got to a point where like, okay, I copied this guy on Inferno, let's say, and he's a very passive player, but I want to watch someone more aggressive. And then I would just watch someone more aggressive who like rushed, and you can normally tell the people who rush because they have like high death per round. And then I would just copy that, and then now, I'm following his pathing, I'm following his rushes or whatever, and I'm just making it better over time. And that was like the approach that I took when I was 14. That's the approach that I took that I've taken like throughout my whole entire career. Like when I was opping, I had a spreadsheet, and uh I had all the maps, and then I had my stats. And then I had the top 5, or I forget, I think like top 5 to 8 oppers from top 10 teams, and I had their stats on every map. And then I just compared it to my stats. And then I thought, okay, this guy, like, I suck on this map, but this guy is consistently owning on this map. So let me just watch some of his demos. And then eventually what happened was you start to realize that oppers, they all have a certain playstyle. Like, not every opera, like there's this misconception that, oh, to be a good opera, you have to be really dynamic. You have to be all over the map. You have to be like doing all this crazy shit. You don't. Like, you watch Simple play, he's not doing a lot of crazy shit. He's doing crazy shit once, maybe twice a half, and then people see the highlight and they think, damn, like that's what a good opera does. But no, he's like in a system, and he's opping very fundamentally sound, and then he's waiting for his moment to do something crazy, you know? But anyways, so, like, I would watch all these operas, and then what I could do is I could categorize them in the way that I said before, like, oh, this opera, he normally plays this way. And I would try to think to myself, what is this good against? And then, oh, this, he plays really disruptive, so maybe this is good against a team that plays, defaulty. So then I hired an analyst, to like my own personal analyst, to kind of look at my opponents for, or to anti-strat pretty much. And from his anti-strat, I could tell which player I wanted to be like. So if, oh, this team plays really fast, how do you want to play? Oh, I'm gonna play back, and have counter flashes ready, and then basically just do what I saw from a better opper. And that has always been my process. And Valorant is a lot harder because you don't have demos. You have to watch like VODs, and then in the VODs you can't see the minimap. So it's a little bit harder. But yeah, it's interesting that you brought that up, because that's literally been my process. And then to circle back to like what I'm trying to improve on now is I'm trying, like, as crazy as this sounds or funny as it sounds, I'm trying to not think so much. I'm just trying to play, because, I have all this knowledge in my head. I have all this experience, and at this point, like, I really feel like this, but like TAC FPS is just in my blood. I've been playing for like 20, or not 20 years. How long have I been playing? I've been playing like 18 years. I've been playing since I was 9. So a long time. And it's in me. Like, I know it. I have the instincts. And oftentimes I just lose out on fights because I'm thinking in this like millisecond window when I shouldn't be thinking. And like, or like I have this gut feeling, and I'm not listening to the feeling for some reason, because I'm trying to analyze what's going on the map, and it's like, but I have the feeling. And it's like, I know that it's trained, because throughout my whole entire career, I've been really methodical, and it's a shame for me not to use it. So, yeah, in rank, that's kind of what I'm working on. Is I'm just trying to play more freely, like more off my feeling, more off my intuition, and yeah,
Yeah, it's again, it like goes back to that the top of the four stages of competency, which is the unconscious competence. So there is
yeah,
there's no like mental bandwidth necessary to execute the correct thing. You're just there.
yeah,
It's automatic at that point. You're just doing it. And and I think it's actually a very interesting point, because especially players like you, because you're looking at so many things to work on and improve all the time. And some a lot of players don't necessarily have that same approach or philosophy. I would say I think it's rarer. If I had to guess, it's not the average. And so yeah, the trade off would be that you get too cluttered with the amount of things
yeah.
you're trying to focus on. I did this conversation with actually one of the people that founded and really directed the development of the Get Amped program. It's a doctor, it's a meta doc is his name, but
Oh yeah, I've
he's no
talked to him.
longer involved. He's amazing, and we talked about accelerated learning, because that's like one of his areas is understanding like learning and understanding all this the current science around all of that. And that's one of the things he talked about. And this is something that you were doing when you're copying people, is you're creating focuses, and there's a specific amount of focuses you want to have, but you don't want to have too many, because at that point
Yeah.
it just becomes too much and you're not effectively learning anymore. You're just kind of too cluttered. So it's interesting the balance you can strike with that. But you always do want to have some focuses, but not too many. And
Yeah.
finding the sweet spot is challenging. And it sounds like you were smarter
Yeah.
than me, because you were actually
No, no.
analyzing and improving stuff, where I was just straight copying and be like, okay, I guess this works. I don't know. I'm not going to question why.
No, it's funny because I tried to take the same approach, but I tried to like one up myself when I came back to CS this time around. I have a notion with like every single map, every I wouldn't say every player, but like a lot of players, different players that played my spots, and I did so many demo reviews, and I went even more in depth. Like instead of just seeing things that they do and then trying to like trust myself to use it, I would try to see how they used it. So, I mean, this is a really common example, but like okay, like in ranked right now, anytime like someone hits your site, most of the time, if you win the round, they just go to the other site. So a lot of like I'll watch naps or not naps, nats, and like if his site gets hit, the next round he's pushing his site because he's thinking, oh, these guys are just gonna go to the other site because I just shut them down, right? And then he always has like a sick flank, and that's why, So I was trying to look at these patterns, but in way more like complicated situations, you know? Um, and then I got to a point where I just had so much shit going on in my brain that I was like not even playing the game, like, and that's like, yeah, that's one thing that I did really bad on when I first came back to CS is I was watching so much and I just didn't trust myself to be able to figure it out within like this certain framework that I'm setting up for myself by watching. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It
Um,
does make sense. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
totally. Because you go too far away from intuitive, and you're outsourcing so much that at
yeah,
some point, like everything, every answer is being outsourced. So you don't
yeah.
have the confidence in yourself to just like figure it out when you're in the moment.
Yes,
Yeah.
and when pressure is on, like when the pressure is on and you're competing in a match, you you want it to be instinctive. Like you don't want to be outsourcing in that moment, You want it to be like just part of you. And you want to have this mentality that it's like is what I said about like playing ranked and always trying to hit the site with like one person instead of just accepting the reality of the situation. Like if you know, it's better to just do something and just kind of know how to navigate within that, even if you're in a bad situation, than to always trying to be picking the right thing. Um, and yeah, so basically that's like one thing that I did really poorly when I went back to CS is I tried to like really go ham when it came to that. And I got to a point where I remember like I switched my spot on Inferno to playing Banana, and I watched so many Banana players. I watched like all of them. I watched, Nico, Yakindar. I watched way more from teams like Fours, teams like Navi. I watched so many players. I even watched Stu back when he was on Liquid. So like it's 2022. I was watching a 2019 demo, and I was just like trying to like watch so much. And then it got to the point where I'm playing the game, and then I didn't know what to do. And I'm just like, how like I can look at my docs and I just have so much shit, but I didn't do any of it. And it's like, how is that even possible? And that's how, that's why. Is because I had way too many things to focus on, way too much going on in my mind. And it's better after that, I realized it's better just to do a few things really, really well than to, do a bunch of things but not that well, you know? And if you get like hard countered doing one of the things that you are really comfortable in, honestly, most of the time, like it doesn't matter because if you're really comfortable in it, I mean, I guess it depends on the situation, but most of the time, if you're really comfortable in it, you will be able to come out of that situation, even at least. Um, so yeah, another rant when it comes to that, but
Yeah, like there's like a term for that. I feel like the paralysis by analysis.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, where you get too far away from taking action because there's so
yeah,
much analysis happening. No, it makes total sense, and it's interesting too because one of the benefits I think people get like at this point for you, like you've observed and watched so much that over time you get a really good understanding of like not just okay what people are doing, but like you can like kind of extrapolate what are the good things because you understand like the first principles of the game, you understand the patterns, like the more conceptual stuff, all that stuff begins to start to make sense and to click. And when you're a newer player, like I feel like the copying thing, like the fake it till you make it idea is really one of the best ways to improve because it gives you that ability to like have something that you're trying to like isolate and practice and focus on as opposed to just playing with no focuses, and then you're kind of like in small chunks improving different parts of your game and because usually the way I would do it, because I did that a lot in other games too, is I would figure out what player am I watching, what of the pros is doing like one thing, like what one thing do I think this guy's the best at that like other people
yeah,
aren't good
yeah,
at, and it can be like tiny things like movement or just like like very like overly specific things, and then I would try to like emulate that player because I'm like trying to take these small chunks and just improve like small chunks at a time, and eventually it all
yeah,
comes together. And like at that time as well, I wasn't also smart enough to be able to like just sit down and be like, okay, this is the all of the first principle understanding the game. I can just come up with everything myself and just understand how everything works and why this is good and why this is not. It's just way easier to just take the good players now and just figure out who's the best at what, and using that as like a good direction. Like so if anyone's like listening and trying to like improve, if you're not taking that approach, it's something to consider because I think it is super helpful for pretty much everybody. So
yeah,
at the
yeah.
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say like right now, like for me, it's all about gunfights. Like that's one thing that I started to take for granted was I mean in CS, I've been playing a lot of these maps for like years and years. So I know all the angles. I know how to like if I'm gonna peek this spot, I know how I'm gonna peek in this situation. I know how to peek in that situation. I know when to peek. I know like that if I just show my shoulder a little too much, I can get seen from this angle. But I know that if I'm gonna die if I don't peek that way, then I'll take the risk. Like all these things, I just feel it. Like I just know it from so many years of playing all these maps. Valorant, I don't have that. Like I'm just being honest, I don't have that ability yet. So, like when I said that I was playing more freely, it was more in terms of like decision making and yeah, I mean that's the main thing was decision making. But what that allows for me to do is that I can pay way more attention to how I'm taking these fights. And like that is like so important because at the end of the day, it's an FPS game. You still have to shoot them in the head. You still have to, kill them. And in Valorant, it's even harder because I don't have a spray to rely on. In CS, if I miss the first bullet, I could almost always like have a good chance with my spray. In in Valorant, if you miss your first bullet, like you have to just most of the time you just have to strafe and burst again, but that's like taking another uh first bullet. I don't know exactly how to explain this, but it's like in CS, if I were to burst, I could always just go into a spray, and the spray was always my bread and butter. In Valorant, you just have to keep bursting or burst and tap, and it's like if you just have to be on target. You have to hit them in the head. Like it's really really important to be precise and to have good control over your crosser and also on top of that, like, obviously positioning yourself well, knowing how to peak angles and stuff like that. Like, that is all stuff that it's like it sounds so basic and I'm a Radiant player and it's like, is a Radiant player really thinking about how to shoot their gun? But that's like that is what I'm focusing on right now. And it's like uh, yeah, it's nice because it brings me back to like the the initial joy that I got from playing CS, which is just like shooting people in the head. Like when I was like
Mhm.
9 and I got a headshot, that felt so amazing to me. And I wasn't getting many. Like I was horrible when I was 9. I was always like bottom of the scoreboard, like 2 and 40. And it's like, but those 2 kills felt really good. And that's kind of how I feel right now in Valorant.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, like the mechanics around that, and that's also something I've noticed. You can can almost become most players are not this way, but you can become like too analytical about it because like the gunfight is like something where you just go for it. But and you can't really, you don't have time to think. You either, or you like, you know, whether it's a wide swing, whether you delay it, like the type of peak that you do, all this stuff just like it kind of comes to you as a player, and you see how, maybe through watching other players, like how other players might handle certain situations, gives you ideas, and you kind of like intuitively kind of build it in over time. And it's supposed to be like really fast thing, but there are some players I think that are really good at like analyzing it and improving that way. But it does come at the risk of like then having the thing that you were talking about before, where your mind is too full when you're executing, and you can't execute from the right place. And I think especially coming from CS2, like you said, I mean, even people that aren't playing from CS, this like Valorant, like you say, you need to have like the some people call it dead zoning, where I don't know what like the most commonly used terms are for this, where you're basically like you say you fire a bullet or two, and then you like counter strafe and go again, because in CS you just say counter strafing, I guess, and
Hmm.
so on and so forth. But I feel like in Valorant, there's loads of players that have like really inefficient gun technique when their movement, with how they take angles, with the way that they peek. Lots of players that they don't understand the risk element of it as well, with certain peaks, and whether they should delay a peak or reposition these types of things. Like there's a lot to like having really good gunfights that I think people don't think about, and there's always a sense of like people who are getting shut down, they'll also think that, okay, I'm just going to reduce everything to a gunfight, and I'm going to ego this guy, not realizing that usually in that position that other person has more confidence, which is also an
Yeah.
interesting aspect of gunfights, is the confidence element. um,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I heard this rule that when I played with Cajun B, if people don't know who that is, he's a old school CS player or CS:GO player, and he played with MSL, who is a Danish IGL. I think your audience probably doesn't know it. They probably don't know these players,
yeah,
but
maybe not. Basically,
yeah,
like super top tier Counter Strike professionals from the Danish scene, and therefore better than everyone else probably, because the Danish scene
yeah,
produced the best players in the IGLs historically. So the cream of the crop of Danish Counter Strike.
yeah, and pretty much like he told me this rule that MSL made for North, which was basically if you ever have doubt, don't make the move. If you're setting up to peak, but your mind you're doubting whether or not you should peak, he would say just don't do it. And obviously, like it could go both ways. Like maybe it's good if you push yourself to do it if you're trying to, test your limits. But I think for the most part, if you're like a pretty seasoned player and you know the game and you trust that you're good, normally that like there's a reason to be hesitant. And even if there isn't and you could have just killed him or whatever, there's no shame in just like backing off and like living to fight another day, or like well, basically living to fight later in the round. And that's one rule that I'll think about a lot whenever I die. Um, is just like where was my mind at? When I was about to take this fight. Like, did I want to take that fight? And most of the time, like I lose fights, I didn't even want to take the fight, but for some reason I did it.
Yeah.
And that's like yeah, that's one thing that I think is like pretty important because it's like I was playing with Tarik yesterday and he was just telling me, yeah, he thinks that it's all about confidence. And it's true to an extent. And I think that's one thing that yeah, people don't they don't think a lot about like your where your mental is at when you're about to take a fight.
Yeah, there's some really interesting points there. The confidence thing is like something I've talked a lot about, because it's one of the most commonly like stated things of like this is the most important thing, yet also at the same time no one knows really how to like what it is, or
How
like how
to
to
get
define
it
it, or
or
like
yeah.
exactly, yeah. It's like it's really funny to me, but so something I've talked a lot about. But one thing I want to revisit that you just said too is something I learned actually from someone that sort of like was sort of a kind of a mentor slash coach in like Quake World and poker and StarCraft at the same time. We like played a lot of stuff together. He's a super smart guy, and he would always tell me when he's teaching me how to play, because he's a professional poker player, like how to play poker. He's always telling me like, can you find a better spot? Like, is this the spot? The understanding like the risk analysis of the current like position that you're in, and trying to make an objective decision, because it's kind of reminding me of what you said, where do I peek or do I reposition? Can I get a better spot? And sometimes you can't. Sometimes the 20% like win rate gunfight that you have, if you actually wait, no, you can't get a better spot. The next one is 10%. Sometimes you have to take the really like shitty like shit spot because that's going to be the best spot. And so like
Yeah.
understanding like the dynamics there, and for the people that do you play poker?
No, no, I
Like,
don't. But I read the mental game of poker.
nice. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, there's a thing in like tournament poker where if you have like a certain stack size, because every round your stack size will get smaller because of the blinds and the ante and so on and so forth. You have less stack equity, and so if you make a depending on your position, you might have like loads of players behind you that can act, or you can have maybe you're acting last and there's only a couple players that are going to act. So it's like all this like risk analysis of like how good is my spot, because if I wait, I'm in like a way worse position, because not only do I not know like how good or bad is the hand that I'm going to get, I also am in this situation where like my stack is getting less. So because my stack is getting less, more people will be likely to call me. So
Yeah.
you get into this like progressively worse position. So you have to like figure out what is the best spot to kind of to shove in that instance. And so I then thought about that a lot when I was thinking about how to make good decisions in like I think tactical FPS games, especially because you do get kind of some time sometimes to like really assess, should I like push this, is this a peak I should make, is this a push I should make, or is this
Yeah.
a repeat I should make, or will I get another chance to outplay my opponent in the round, which is another thing too, is the sense of I think this is amazing. Maybe the most amazing thing about like Counter Strike or Valorant or tactical FPS is that it's round based, and so the more rounds that you have, in theory, the more opportunities that the better team will have to exert their advantages in skill. Um,
Yeah.
and the less gambly it becomes, the more of a sample size. Much like poker, if you're a better player, yeah, someone can upset you with the worst hand when you have the best hand, when it comes when the river comes and all the rest of it. But if over like 100,000 hands you're winning 100% of the time against so yeah, it's interesting. I found poker interesting because it allowed me to zoom out a lot more in how I try to assess risk or think about outcomes, to be less outcome oriented and to think more objectively about like the game. It's a bit of a
Yeah.
side tangent.
Yeah, no, it's similar to CS, or well, I guess I think in Valorant too. I'm not exactly sure, but in CS for sure. If you're the better team, similar to what you said, with the rounds, um, the more rounds you play, the more chances the better team has. But same with like within the round, like the longer the round goes. The
Mm,
longer the round goes, the more chances you give the worst team to make mistakes. And if they don't make mistakes, as in they don't push or regress on bad timings or at the wrong spot, then eventually what normally happens is that it's like an anaconda, and you're just squeezing them into a smaller, smaller, smaller space to the point where there are so many variables going on in their mind that they can't like shoot. You know what I mean? And if you watch like the good teams, they don't do that without a reason. Like they
mm,
don't they don't give up all the space on the whole entire map unless there's a reason. Like unless they have like good util to hold the hit, or unless they have like an omen TP to come, and fight with three people. And so good teams are really good at this, or good players, I should say, are really good at this. Like this like you take, I take. You know what I mean? And then you just are always trying to look for that. And then on top of that, like there's one thing that really helped me in CS was when I started to use this phrase in my mind where I would just at some point in the round, I would always just think to myself, okay, the gloves are coming off. And that basically just meant like doesn't matter if I die, doesn't matter if I miss, doesn't matter if, we lose the round. I got to fight right now, you know? And so that would look like I remember Cash specifically was like the first time I ever like started doing this, but I would be just sitting in A main, just holding the A main push, and then we would come back to A and it's time to hit A. And I'm going out A main and I'm thinking to myself, all right, the gloves are coming off. And I just would go out and like, you know, my mind was just, like, fearless, like, it doesn't matter if I die, I'm gonna if I'm gonna die, I'm gonna try to take one with me, and, and that like helped like unlock this like I don't know, this like next level of just like winning gunfights. Um so yeah,
Nice.
that was one thing that was really helpful. Oh, and then there was one more thing that I wanted to talk about when you said shoot, I forget. It was when you were talking about how we were copying, other players and how basically like what I did as a kid as well. And I like try to do this now, but it's a lot harder now. But when I was young, I would copy like characters in a show, but I would just copy their like I don't know how
Mm.
I saw them. Does that make sense? Like
I know what you mean. Yeah.
yeah, there's this meme in CS actually where like if you have a Steam uh profile picture and it's like an anime person that those kids are like cracked, and I guarantee it has something to do with what I'm about to say. And it's like I remember I was watching this show called Dexter. And did you ever watch Dexter?
Yeah. I
It's like
didn't. I watched a
yeah.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so for those of you that haven't watched it, it's like a show about just this kind of like this vigilante, and he's a serial killer pretty much, and he's like he only kills bad people, and he's just so like methodical and like cold and like careful with every move that he makes. And I watched that when I was, 15 or 16 or whatever. And then I would try to like embody that in my CS. So every move I made, I tried to be like really calculated and really like even if I was going aggressive, I was like trying to be calculated about it and methodical. And there was this like so in the show there's like this rule book that he has to follow that was created by his dad. And the rule book is called I think like Harry's code or something. And it's basically just a code for him not to get caught. And I tried to make my own version of that for CS. So, like, I remember one of the first rules that I made was like, okay, when you're flanking, don't rush the flank. like, like if you have to take your time, pretty much. And and then that was like a rule that I followed. And every time I was in that situation where I'm flanking, I just would flank on my own timing. You know what I mean? Obviously, sometimes you got to go fast, but as a kid, that's what I would do. And another scenario that I remember was like, was I remember I was trying to shoot people not looking at me, and I just, like, panicked, and I thought to myself, like, "Why don't I just take my time and just, like, aim at their head?" Like, they're like, "Why don't I just do that?" And then it was, like another rule that I made was, like, just aim at their head, and I don't know, it's, like, so stupid, but, it's, like, stuff that comes up in every single game or, like it is so simple, but it takes that level of presence in the moment to actually apply the things that I'm saying. Like yeah, I don't know exactly how to explain it, but I think that's another thing that a lot of people probably do already that they don't even know is like they try to embody this character that they really like.
No, it's really cool because it speaks again to like intentional training because you're basically selecting for like a certain play style. I mean, I think Valorant's interesting in this way because like I think they almost try to do this a little bit, obviously with like the design of the characters. Like Cypher is kind of like this ratty kind of like I don't know, this just has this kind of like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
this
I can see that.
presence of like a slower, more methodical play style. He's got the cameras and all this kind of stuff, but and I totally understand what you mean. It's I think it's a powerful tool to like focus you to to intentionally train in a certain way. And the thing is that like once at some point you probably get bored of it, or some point maybe you like add more to the rule book. Like you're developing something, a system, and that is like so good. Like a lot of people don't do that. Like a lot of players that are like hard stuck as it were, they don't have something to grasp onto to help them as they try to make improvements, and instead they're a bit all over the place. So creating your own systems, whatever it looks like, I think it's super powerful, and it's really fun like that you shared that because I'm sure, like you said, there's a lot of people that either do it without knowing, or there's a lot of people that actually do stuff like that these days.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it can even like, it can even help you just train your mental strength, Like I was watching this anime called Hajime no Ippo. I don't know if you've ever
Oh, I don't
watched
know that
that.
one.
Okay, yeah, it's just about this boxer. He's like this kid that like gets beat up at school, but he just has so much like perseverance and like no matter how many times he gets knocked down, he'll get back up, like that kind of story. And then, that's how I feel playing ranked right now, is I feel like I'm that guy. I'm getting knocked down every single game, and I just have to keep getting back up, and keep playing. And, like, I'm actually thinking about that in the moment because it's like seeing it, helps you actually like, what it looks like because you actually saw it. So, yeah, that's, like, a funny thing. I still try to do it even though I'm, 28 or whatever, 27 now.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's quite insightful in a way because I think it's kind of what the Bible is supposed to be for like the society, society in a certain way. It's like, okay, we're gonna tell all these stories, and encoded in these stories is like this code of conduct, this like
Yeah.
morality, like this way of existing in society, like these rules and frameworks. And that's kind of what, like, I think what you're saying is the same way. It's like there's this story that's being told that is got this message of perseverance, like never giving up, like that you can always overcome like these types of things. And it's such a good reminder to be inspired by those kinds of things and having those things to help you on a journey of adversity, because that's what it is. It's like there's a lot of adversity, and a lot of people kind of really do buckle to the adversity. They let it, like we talked about earlier, people, it's very common that like the victim mentality like sets in. Oh, it's other people's fault. Like, why is this happening to me? I'm getting really upset. I expect better from my teammates. It's like there's all these like ways of thinking that are just really, you failing to overcome the current like mental obstacles that you have. Because and there's a very easy way to understand that, and it's because you're getting negatively affected mentally by what's happening, as opposed to being able to like take it as a challenge. And then going and circling back again to something else really early on in the conversation, when you're talking about performing under pressure, and I think you said that like pressure is not a bad thing. Like pressure is not a bad thing. You don't look at it in a bad way. And this is I've seen lots of workshops in like sports performance about like pressure and performing under pressure. And it often boils down to the sense of people either perceive pressure as a challenge, or what happens is they allow pressure to kind of affect them, and it presses on those mental game leaks, and then they start to realize, oh, these are all the reasons why I should feel nervous, because the pressure like brings on some nerves, but you either like channel it into the challenge that you can overcome, or it kind of like it starts like maybe eating at you a little bit. Oh yeah, I don't feel actually, I feel like I could have prepared harder, but you wouldn't feel that way if you prepared like properly. There's like all these like different things that pressure can start to attack. So yeah, you kind of reminded me of all these different points that we've covered in the conversation so far.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's all connected in some way. Like when it comes to, performing, and because like we're like when you compete in something, it is like it teaches you a lot, but you just have to be willing to learn from it. And I think like another thing about like pressure and how you perceive it is like if you judge so much on losses, like if you see someone losing and you think to yourself like, "Oh, that guy's a loser." Winners won't think like that. Like people who won, they don't see someone lose and then like think that, "Oh, that guy's a loser," because they know what it takes to compete to begin with. You know what I mean? The people who are judging, like especially is so funny. Like the people who like type on HLTV forums, or like I don't know if people do that in Valorant. I'm assuming they do, but like the people that type on Reddit and stuff like that, who like call these players bad or call these players, losers or whatever, they're not the ones putting themselves on the line. You know what I mean? And it's like when once you have if you judge other people in that way, when you're kind of put to the test, I think that's when you'll like, succumb to the pressure because you have that kind of judgmental mindset. Um And like to even put yourself in the limelight to compete and kind of show that you might not be good enough to win, that takes like a lot out of you. And all the stuff that, I'm talking about, or that we've talked about in this last like 2 hours or whatever. It's all to help with that. It's all to help you get better as a player, get better as a teammate, and overall just get better as a person. Because that like all these things can be applied just to your day to day life. With anything you do. And I think that's really like what it comes down to when you're competing. That's why I've always said like I don't care what game I compete in. I just want to compete because I think that's where I'm learning the most out of, or that's the best way to use my time.
I love that. It's funny. Have you heard of the "Man in the Arena" quote by Theodore Roosevelt?
No,
Roosevelt.
no, I haven't.
Okay, I gotta read it because it's fucking awesome and it basically just sums up everything that you just said. It starts like, it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither knew victory nor defeat. And that's
Yeah,
yeah. So that's what you reminded me of, because it's like exactly that kind of vibe. Um, and that's something I
yeah,
love about competition too, is the camaraderie, right at the top of all of the people that have dedicated themselves to something that is so difficult, and the only people that can really truly understand what those people have been through, like yourself, like being at the majors and so on, is those elite CS players, the people that you're playing against in those moments. Those are the only people that can understand truly what you are doing and what you've been through in that moment. And I love that camaraderie and that kind of brotherhood that exists in competition. That's so special. Only you get that, you know.
yeah. No, it's true. I mean, that quote gave me chills because I can, yeah. I mean, I definitely resonate with that a lot, and yeah, the camaraderie. That's like, you know, like that's one thing with like the tier two scene. I would say I don't know about in Valorant, but okay, I don't want to make this general thing about tier 2 because I don't know all the players, but when people, talk about how much time they've put into something, it's like you're not special. Like everyone is putting in this time. And if they're not putting in this time and they're like, in a place of status or maybe a pro player, they probably won't stay there for very long, unless they're contributing in other ways. And and it's like I feel like that yeah, like it's a given, like, you're supposed to put in time. You're supposed to have, like, an imbalanced life. You're supposed to have sacrificed a lot if if you're gonna be a pro player. You know what I mean? And so, I think that's, like yes, because every pro player knows that or has done that in their life, there's no way that they're gonna shit on, a fellow pro for whatever when they know what it took to get here, and, yeah, that's why, like, whenever I would read, like, Reddit comments and I would see some stuff like that is like, man, I can't I mean, you can't help but just laugh because it's like this guy has no clue, like,
Mm,
what any of these guys have been through, you know what I mean?
yeah, so much is unknown to it, and that's the thing
Yeah.
too, is that you can't even. I was thinking about this the other day, because obviously people will say lots of stuff on Reddit and other forums, and the general public doesn't have access to all the information, because you can't really have all the information. Like, it's not
Yeah.
possible for you to have all the information, generally speaking. And even if you did have all the information, it's still going to be hard to, I think, it's going to be, I don't know, it's still going to be hard to really understand fully, because you're not those people, you're not in that context, you're not a part of those systems, like whatever it might be. It's just very hard to, I think, have a true picture or represent things, effectively. And people who are at such a distance to those things as well, as people on the forums are also going to be fairly disconnected, in a way which I think also impacts the way that they may view things. So it generally just tends to be better that, that they don't know that they don't have access to know everything, because even if they did, I don't think it would really make much of a difference. So, but as you say, it's like hard to draw that line mentally when you see people talking shit, um, about you, and even if rationally, rationally, that it doesn't make sense, it can still hit you
Yeah.
emotionally. Like, it's still, it's like, well, there's someone like that just sent like some fucking, negative vibes out into the universe directed at me. That's kind of weird.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, it just really depends on how you, like, see the situation, right? Like, if it like I remember when I was, like, early on in my career when I was, like, 20 I think it was, like, 2014. I was, like, reading everything. I was, like, reading all the good comments after I had, like, a really good match, and then reading all the bad comments, and it was, like, impacting me so much, and then I remember I was talking to Valens, who's been, like, a long-term or long-time mentor of mine and friend of mine. He just told me, uh, that, if you're gonna let all the positivity fuel you, then all the negativity is also gonna bring
Mhm.
you down. And so you have to kinda pick, like, do you wanna read everything and have that, or do you wanna just not read anything and just focus on yourself? And yeah, he told me that pretty early on in my career, and then from there, I pretty much never read anything. There have been times where I remember, like, on Gen G, like I said, earlier in the podcast, where for some reason I just had to read it, and it definitely tore me down in a way, but it also, motivated me because, like, I had this list on my I think it was on my notepad actually, or my note app, where, like, all these, like, analysts, all these people, like, who talk shit about me, I just, like, wanted to prove them wrong so bad, like, I I mean, to me, you I think having that kinda chip on your shoulder does bring a little bit of baggage, but at the time, that's, like, what I used to, like, really fire myself up, and yeah, it's always, like, about taking a negative situation and just, like, finding some way to make it positive for yourself.
Yeah, that's again, it's really cool because that kind of circles back to that that point that you made about trying again to like resensitize yourself, and because if imagining a world where you don't have that and you're kind of maybe having some issues in your performance, again, it's like a little bit of less fuel to your fire. And it's interesting because if you're like, I think, more developed emotionally, you can create, you can find the tools. There's lots of different tools out there, or or you can create your own tools to deal with difficult emotional situations. And then I mean, generally it's going to be the case that, a good tool in this sense means that you are kind of, re-diverting that negativity into and using it as something that's actually like you're able to reframe it in a way that actually helps you. And that's
Yeah.
you, as opposed to just ignoring and repressing that thing. You've now kind of added some fuel to the fire. It's kind of reminds me a little bit of like, martial arts, where, if you're gonna, you're using someone's energy against them, they're trying to strike you, and you're able to like redivert the energy to make your attack more powerful, type of situation. So
Yeah.
it's interesting how that works. Are you
Yeah.
do you feel like you're in a spot right now where you're like, you feel like you have a pretty good system to deal with all of this stuff? Or are you still
Um,
working on it?
I I think system is, like, makes it sound, like, so organized, but
Mm.
it's not really organized. I feel like at this point, it's kinda like that's just, like, how I live my life in a way. Um, like, for instance, I've been playing Valorant. A lot of people who've watched my stream can probably see that I'm not that good right now. And and it's just, like, the first thing that immediately came to my mind was, like, "Okay, well, how could I expect to be good when, I have literally a fifth of or I have, like, a fifth of the hours of, like, a lot of these guys I'm playing against, right? I think I have, like, 800 hours. A lot of people have, like, 5,000, 6,000. Some people have even more because they scrim a lot. And so how can I really expect to be that good, And then it's like, but if it just stopped there, then it's like I'm kind of feeling sorry for myself, or I'm trying to justify why I'm bad. But then I tried to think about it more like, okay, well, how can I use this? And it's like I can use this by kind of coming at this game with a fresh, like, state of mind where I'm not clouded by all the experience I had, and I just need to just play as if I'm a beginner because I am a beginner and I just need to relearn. And, like, as long as I do that, as long as I don't, like, come into this game with this, like, ego or this mindset that, oh, I'm a CS pro, I should be good at this game, then I think I'll learn the game pretty fast and I might even be able to, like, build on what I've learned and, like, change. some of the things that people normally do, and yeah, I mean that's just kind of how I feel like I don't think there's any system. I think it's more just that's what I try to do with like everything I do, you know. Um like another example is I've been rock climbing a lot recently. Do you rock climb?
I have done in the past, but not anymore.
Yeah, so I've been rock climbing and it's something that I'm learning for the first time. Like I just started maybe 3 or 4 months ago and I've been taking lessons from these guys who are competitive climbers. And they're talking to me a lot about the things that we're talking about, how to learn, how to perform, and things like that. And when I was telling you that, one of the things I'm working on right now is to not think so much. I actually got that from a rock climbing lesson because I was climbing and the guys were telling me that, I'm looking like I'm really hesitant, like I'm rigid and all this. And then he asked me, "What do you think a monkey is thinking about when he's swinging through the trees?" And I was like, "I don't know." And then they go, "Nothing. They're just doing it. They're, like they just do it." And then that's what I'm trying to do now. And it's like in aim training. Sorry, like, this is just to show that it applies to everything, like, if you actually try to apply it, you can apply it to everything. Um, but in aim training, like, one thing that I'm doing right now that is, like, I don't know, maybe I'm stupid for not doing this before, but, like, I just try to look at my target, and then I just try to get to the target, and it's like it sounds so stupid, but it actually helps me so much because like, I know how to do these movements, I've been playing for so long, but it's just the thought of having to be conscious of everything I'm doing, that kinda hinders me down, So now I'm intentionally not thinking about that, Like, I'm intentionally not being intentional in a way,
Mhm.
and, yeah, it's yeah, so I I just try to, like, learn like, anything I do, I just try to learn a lot about it, and then I feel like because I approach it that way, it eventually will apply to everything I do. Like if I learn something about rock climbing, it'll apply to aim training and CS. If I learn something or Valorant, if I learn something about Valorant, it can apply to climbing and aim training and I guess that's the system really. Is just whatever I try to do, I just try to do it really well and I try to get into it.
That's awesome. That like this is I think it's one of the things I fell in love with because of gaming was seeing how I'll learn like a concept in one thing and then like I'll play a different game and be like, how does this concept apply? And then I was like, oh,
Yeah.
it does apply, and but in a different way, but it still applies. And then I'll learn a different concept because of that specifically that new thing I did. I started
Yeah.
playing and I was like, oh shit, how does this apply to this other? And then you just do this over the years and you're like, oh my god, it's all connected. It's all
Yeah, yeah,
everything's the same.
exactly.
So, and but it's like so like cool. I don't know. I love that. I love that aspect to it, and it's really cool that you're getting some of that like wisdom from the rock climbing because like this is why like I bring poker up a lot because I got really into poker and I tried to like be a professional player and all that and what I came away with is a lot of Buddhist philosophy. Honestly, like
Oh yeah.
there's a lot of like really interesting stuff there about how to control your emotions and your mind and how to view things and and it was also foreign to me at that time, but it makes sense because if for anyone that's like gotten deep into poker, it is an emotional battle more than like well, honestly it's such an emotional battle, so you got to be able to manage that. And so it's so interesting seeing what different experts in different fields how they almost have a PhD in like these very specific things and then going and like trying to learn the wisdom that they have. I don't know, it's fascinating. That's why I got so fascinated with the aim training community because I'm like, wait a second. These guys for the last like 4 or 5 years have just been doing this one thing, like, and they're treating it like it's
Yeah.
their professional Valorant or their professional Counter Strike. So the very top of this, they're gonna know some shit that nobody else knows. I want to know what that is. um, so that's super cool, man.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the first thing I look at whenever I dive really deep into something is like who's the best at this or like who's the best and what makes them really good, Like for instance, I got into tennis a few years ago and then, obviously Roger Federer is one of the best and I just started like trying to figure out why he's so good and how can I be the Roger Federer of CS or Valorant. And then so that's always like something that's so fun to do is just how figuring out why people are good at what they do and then stealing it and like copying them in a way.
Yeah, yeah. It is awesome. There's actually a good book that you reminded me of. It's called Mastery by Robert Greene. If you've
Uh,
heard of that one or not, but
never,
it basically goes across a bunch of different concepts about mastery, and it'll pick like various like super like mega famous like masters of various fields, like Leonardo da Vinci, for example, or the Beatles, or like whatever it might whoever it might be, different fields. But it will basically say I think Benjamin Franklin's in there as well, and it will say like what is special about those people within a certain like part of the framework of mastery that's kind of set up by the whole book. It's really cool. It's a really great book.
okay, I'll check it
So
out.
yeah, it's really compelling. With that said, I think this is a good place to leave off because I think you're supposed to be climbing soon. I think, and
Yeah.
we don't want to upset the girlfriend. So um, thank you so much for talking to me, man. Do you have any kind of final thoughts or shout outs, anything like that?
I mean, no, just really appreciate you having me on. Appreciate, your audience for listening to me ramble. I was a little unorganized today with my thoughts, but I think that it was fun. It was a really fun conversation. And then yeah, I just want to thank the fans and, for supporting me. Hopefully you'll support me in whatever I do next. And then yeah, it's weird. It's weird thanking my parents, but because they probably won't watch this interview, but always got to thank them and want to thank my girlfriend for always supporting me.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much.